Hey, what's up, Reefers? I hope you all enjoyed the story of my very first 30-gallon reef tank. If you missed it, I will have the link up here as well as at the end of this video. Today we are going back in history again, back to 2002. I want to tell you about my highly experimental second reef tank. It was a 10-gallon nano that really transitioned me from a total newbie to someone who has more of an idea of how things should be done, but may not necessarily follow the best practices still. I was, and sometimes still is, guilty of thinking that I am the exception to the rules. And this is particularly why I named my channel the Inappropriate Reefer. While this 10-gallon tank has some crazy ups and downs, I still think this period was one of my favorite time in the hobby. Everything was new and full of possibilities, and that local fish store near my school constantly stocking weird and unusual stuff at low prices further flamed my experimental nature. So this 10-gallon nano tank happened back in 2002, right after I moved into a townhouse with two friends for college. And one of them is also into Reef aquarium. My friend Alex is the opposite of me. He is super organized and meticulous. He is the appropriate reefer. And together, we would visit the local fish store aquarium center in Baltimore, as well as place online orders for corals, fish, and cleanup crew. And this really fueled my reef addiction. Thank you, Alex. My 10-gallon nano tank is a standard 10-gallon tank with a hang-on-the-back filter. Except I am not using any media or filter pad, so it is purely for water circulation. For light, I bought a DIY power compact unit that puts out a respectable amount of light. I think it worked out to around 6 or 7 watts per gallon. And yes, watts per gallon was how we measure light intensity back in the days. For livestock, initially I kept the usual reef inhabitants, but then I wanted to keep something more unusual. So after some exploration, I picked up 2 leaf fish from Aquarium Center for $20 each. I got a yellow leaf fish and then a brown one a few weeks later. Now, I never tried weaning them onto frozen food. I kept a separate 2.5-gallon tank stocked with ghost shrimps and guppies, and I would just use them as feeders. I was able to do this because Aquarium Center was really close to my house and things were a lot cheaper back then, and it also gave me an excuse to go back and visit once in a while. Because the 10-gallon tank is now a leaf fish species-only tank, I am limited to what I could add to this tank. That is when I took a serious interest in corals, because those are the things that leaf fish would not harm. See the frog spawn? I wasn't lying when I said that frog spawn is one of my favorite corals, and I always have one in my tank. So this tank started out very sketchy. I did not know why the water was always cloudy, and sometimes I would get a red mat over the sand. But now I know that it was due to high level of waste in the system and poor water circulation. I think I did water change once a month, if even that. I was bad. But somehow the animals pulled through, and somewhere along the way, the system stabilized and the water became clear. I attributed this to the macroalgae I was growing in the tank, and it was mainly the grape calubra. However, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. I was away from my house for a long weekend, and when I came back, the tank was milky white. It turned out that because I have not trimmed back the grape calubra enough, it went sexual. Now what that means is that all the macroalgae would turn transparent and release whatever it is that they're releasing into the water, causing the tank to crash in the process. And this marked the end of my really highly experimental and inappropriate 10-gallon tank. While this 10-gallon tank was a disaster for most of its life, it did teach me a lot about reef keeping, and it kept me engaged in the hobby. Using what I learned from this tank, I set up my previous 30-gallon tank again and applied the knowledge to this build. However, this 30-gallon tank version 2.0 did not last that long. Because I quickly decided that I wanted more real estate for aquascaping, so I moved up to a 65-gallon tank, which is to this day still my favorite reef tank. And I cannot wait to share that story with you guys.